Imagine a world without the right to collectively bargain, without the law that requires school districts to recognize your union and to bargain with your collective. Instead, Illinois is a world filled with 25 strikes a year and more than 200 illegal strikes over the course of a decade. Hundreds of teachers lost their jobs for going on strike, and some were thrown in jail. There are segregated schools, a civil rights movement, and women have to wear skirts to school. There are no limits on class sizes, far fewer supports, and sometimes not even enough textbooks for all students. There is no collective voice, at least not one that has to be recognized. That's where our story begins.
So the years without a contract were basically whatever the board wanted to give you in the form of salary and whatever they wanted to do in the form of working conditions is what you lived with. But we didn't know any other way.
And we were just begging, that's all. We just begged. It was just a force of will. And that was it.
Having graduated from ISU, I thought I could teach anywhere. As they came to the university to interview for potential teachers from all over the state, I went through that. 3 potentials. Really responded well, followed up, and then one was honest enough to tell me, "You're wonderful, everything, your transcript, all of this, but my district isn't ready for a Black female."
I did my student teaching at a school that did not have any African Americans because the schools were not integrated. And they had said that I was going to be getting a position at that school because the district had determined they were going to hire me. Well, they called me in August and said that they were going to, rather than place me at the home school, that I was going to go to the Riley School. And so the Riley School was the one African-American school in the district. They would give us $200 a year as a salary increase. And, it was you take the $200 or you not take it at all. So we were not being paid fairly.
The IEA had been trying to get collective bargaining for years. Years, a million years.
In the early 1960s, the Illinois Education Association was something administrators told their staff to join. After all, principals, superintendents, and other administrative staff were also part of the association. New teachers often signed up their first day on the job because their boss told them to.
My first day at Hinsdale, I walked in the door and I said, do you guys have a union? Oh, shh. No. We don't. We have an association. We're an association of professionals, but we don't have a union. I said, we bargain, such as it is, without a law. We have a contract. We file grievances. We elect officers. It sounds to me like we're a union.
But by 1969, the IEA released new organizational priorities. Service to members would expand and include contract negotiations. The contracts would do more than establish salaries and benefits. They would address class size, workload, require teacher aides, address discipline procedures, evaluations, and curriculum-related issues like textbook selection. Then, in 1971, the IEA holds a constitutional convention, ultimately removing administrators, rewriting the Constitution and bylaws, and laying the groundwork for the union we have today.
None of this would have happened without that separation. And the folks who made that separation had guts and took a lot of gaff, but we had to fight for our rights. We had to fight for our students' rights.
During the 70s, there were on average 25 strikes a year, and without a collective bargaining law, many locals went on what's known as a recognition strike, attempting to get school boards to acknowledge the union and negotiate.
People would say, we cannot take this anymore, and we're not going to take it. And so there were so many strikes each year. I mean, there were hundreds of strikes because the people got tired of being treated less than human.
Throughout the 70s, the IEA was building power, signing up members all across the state. IPACE, the Illinois Political Action Committee for Education, was created. Each member would contribute $5, a small price, but when combined with IEA's growing membership, it made a big impact. IEA also held its first lobby day. Members from around the state converged on Springfield, sharing their stories and their struggles with lawmakers. The number of UNISERV directors more than doubled during this time, and by the mid-70s, there were more than 350 IEA locals throughout every county around the state, enshrining IEA as the frontrunner in the organizing wars with the Illinois Federation of Teachers, or IFT. Now, the IEA had money and muscle, and their recommendations for elections were powerful. Holding recommendation hearings all over the state for every level of government, IEA members were making sure those elected, regardless of their party, supported public education and a collective bargaining law.
So we were definitely a political powerhouse in the late 70s, and we only got stronger. We endorsed Republicans and Democrats. We always have. We always will, as long as folks in both parties support public education.
While all of that was happening publicly, things were also changing internally at the IEA. In 1973, Reg Weaver ran for president and lost. That's when IEA's people of color formed a caucus and started attending meetings.
And I'll never forget Kurt Plott, who was the executive director at the time. He said, "Reg, you better organize the Minority Caucus." At the time, there were not that many black folks and brown folks going to the IEA convention. And he said, "Reg, you need to organize them."
And our initial was just to grow the organization, just to have more minority members aware of what IEA offered. Because it offers training, learning, exposure you can't buy. But if you get involved, you get it all.
Then, in 1978, Republican Governor Jim Thompson was running for re-election. He won by about 5,000 votes. And IEA was the only union to back him. Big Jim recognized his path to victory was paved, in large part, by the IEA. He pledged his support to the union's collective bargaining law.
And I believe it was in 1979, 1980, Governor Thompson. And he said, "You get it to my desk and I'll sign it."
He felt strongly that his election victory over Adlai Stevenson in 1980 was due to the IEA. They were the only union that supported him. Teachers turn out to vote in big numbers, and he recognized that. He felt that in a very, very razor-thin, close election, it was clear that they pushed him over the top. The time was just right for education.
After years of working his way up through various leadership roles, IEA elected Reg Weaver as its first black president in 1981. Reg continued to push membership recruitment efforts around the state, reinforcing the strong organizing culture that continued to define the IEA.
And I think Reg was the right person for the right time. He worked well with other legislators to help get this passed, and he had strong relationships throughout the association. He just was good with other labor leaders, with members of the General Assembly, with teachers and administrators. He just did a nice job for the IEA in that time period.
He turned the whole organization around. He was very good at creating a positive atmosphere. His election was a turning point for the IEA.
I just tried to figure out some kind of way to bring these folks together, because I knew that if we were not able to come together, we would not be successful as an organization. But at the end of the day, my motto was, bring me some members.
During that time, IEA's Government Relations Director, Ken Bruce, remembers it this way, quote, "The election of Harvey teachers, Reg Weaver, Pearl Mack, and Ann Davis to top leadership positions in the early 1980s greatly enhanced our influence among the emerging African American leadership in the General Assembly. especially on Chicago's South Side and the South Suburbs.
And we were very successful in terms of having legislators elected that we had campaigned for. And so with their campaigning for legislators who were going to speak and advocate for the issues that were of importance to us, it made a difference.
With the Minority Caucus's help, the union was building momentum and creating a reputation for itself in Springfield and beyond. And IEA continued, without the help of other unions, to push for a collective bargaining law.
We would pass a little thing and celebrate that. And then in 2 years, we would pass something a little bit larger. And then in 2 years, I really think that one of the problems that folks have today is thinking it all comes at once. And maybe some things do, but the vast majority of legislative wins are a little bit at a time.
Then, in 1981, the Elgin teachers went on strike, and this time, the teachers weren't fired. 3 member leaders, Ed Schock, Kathy Thomas, and Rupert Searcy, along with their IEA Uniserv director, Bob Jensen, were sent to jail after a judge ordered them back to work, and they refused to comply.
I'll never forget the words. He remanded us to the custody of the sheriff. It took a lot of courage. When people know the end of the story, it's a lark, or some thought so. But it isn't a lark when you don't know how it's going to end, and you know you're responsible for leading an organization that's doing something that could cost people their jobs.
Later that year, IEA finally gets a win. The mini collective bargaining bill passes the legislature and Thompson signs it into law. It took more than a decade to get something on the books, and it wasn't everything. This law forced school districts to recognize unions, but it did not require them to bargain with the union.
So we said, okay, well, that's good. That's the beginning. But we got to do something to make it more comprehensive and something that people will do, that you have to negotiate whether you want to or not. So we went back to the drawing board.
The law took effect in 1982. Everything was working together. IEA influence and power was growing, both in the capital and around the state. IEA was building a reputation as a political powerhouse, not affiliated with any one political party, but as the leaders of the education party. Jim Thompson was now the governor and had pledged to back IEA and sign a bill. And President Reg Weaver brought everyone together and inspired them to take action. In late June 1983, IEA's collective bargaining bill, House Bill 1530, passes both the Illinois House and Senate. The bill, officially known as the Illinois Educational Labor Relations Act, the IELRA, was wide-sweeping and comprehensive. It created the Illinois Educational Labor Relations Board to oversee the relationship between education unions and their school districts. And it did what the 1981 law did not. It required school districts to recognize and bargain with unions.
After a while, it became clear, based on what other states were passing, what a really good collective bargaining law would look like. In fact, the law that eventually passed today is probably the best law in the country. Most comprehensive, best by far in terms of its language.
I think it's allowed teachers to take control of education. It's allowed us to be much more vocal about the working and learning conditions of students, the professional development of teachers, growth of teachers, teacher evaluation, the things that are important when you evaluate teachers, the things that are important to help teachers grow and be more effective, the kind of programs that teachers need to grow and be more effective. And so it allowed us to take control of our profession and become better educators and deliver more to our students.
And Governor Thompson signed landmark legislation tonight giving collective bargaining rights to state and local government workers and teachers. The governor received a standing ovation from hundreds of members of the Illinois Education Association which has been lobbying for the legislation for a decade.
I probably would not have been, nor would I be, the governor of the state of Illinois today without the trust, the help, and the support of the IEA, and there wasn't any way in the world I was going to veto their bill.
A write-up in the Chicago Tribune said, quote, "The effect of House Bill 1530 is to give teachers official VIP status among all public employees with their own statewide mechanism for getting their problems solved. It seems to take a lobby as muscular as the Illinois Education Association to create a separate special set of laws for them." The law went into effect in 1984, and that's when the work shifted. Many school administrators had never bargained a contract, and certainly not under the IELRA, which meant IEA's UNISERV directors and the local bargaining teams had their work cut out for them. There was no stopping the IEA. In 1985, the IEA Advocate, IEA's member newspaper, reported 500 new contracts had been bargained, and IEA membership now topped 60,000.
But then we had a lot of people to educate. First of all, our own members, that we could organize and we could ask for things, and we didn't have to take what was given to us. And then we had to educate board members and administrators. And our UNISERV directors really had their job cut out for them to deal with that, because most of board members and administrators at the time didn't know anything about unions.
In the years that followed the passage of the IELRA, IEA had a series of rapid victories, not just for teachers, but for growing membership categories within the IEA, education support professionals, and higher ed faculty and staff. Victories for ESPs included duty-free lunch, early retirement, and prohibition of residency requirements. IEA was also gaining momentum within the higher education community, organizing contracts and increasing rights for members. And perhaps most importantly, the creation of the IELRA helped create more ESP positions than ever before.
And as they were exposed and their issues the same as with teacher issues, they became a part of our local association. And becoming a part of the local association, they learned about the state just as we had. And as their issues were being solved and their contracts were being bargained with, again, the assistance of our UNISERV directors, their exposure to IEA became greater, and they saw the benefit of being members of IEA, because IEA was going to give the training to the members so that they could, in their locals, bargain. They could, in their locals, be a part of the curriculum planning, all of those things that impacted their lives.
In the decades that followed, IEA continued to solidify its position as the advocacy union for all public education employees in Illinois. In 1999, we surpassed 100,000 members.
It's just amazing that when we work together, we get more, and collective bargaining caused that to happen.
Today, we are the largest union in Illinois. We've solidified our right to collectively bargain by working alongside other unions to make sure the Workers' Rights Amendment was added to the state constitution, further protecting our right to a collective voice and collective action.
And I think we have to realize that people have many, many advantages today that they would never have had without the help of unions. And I'm very proud to be a union member.
But this is not where the story ends. The attacks against public education have only gotten louder and more persistent. Our students need us. Our union needs us. Public education needs us. We have to move forward remembering who we are and where we've come from, making sure all educators know about the struggles we've overcome so they have the inspiration and drive to push us forward in the future.
Because some people today take collective bargaining for granted.
And I think it's real important that they know the history. They have to know the history of how we got where we are.
They need to know the battles that we fought, from having no maternity leave and not being able to wear slacks and having no personal leave and having no say in curriculum, to where we are now. They need to know what the fights were that we fought to get where we are, so it never goes back there again.
We worked like hell to get it. And I hope all members understand and appreciate and work like hell to keep it.
I think it's absolutely important that our people know how we got it, what it took to get there, and why it's important for us to continue to do things to make sure that we don't lose it.